For real. Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Matson. We are going to be talking about comparing and ordering decimals. By the end of today, you'll be able to take any set of decimals and be able to tell me which one is greatest, which one is least, and all of the numbers in between. So let's first take a minute to talk about decimals. So if we consider this big block 1, like 1 whole, or like $1, like one whole number, let's pretend like that's how big it is. Okay, that's one whole number, one whole dollar. Okay, well, when you hear of a tenth, it is called a tenth because it takes 10 of these to equal one whole. So 10 tenths equals one whole. Kind of cool, huh? Now, if we take a tenth and cut that into 10 pieces, we are given a hundredth. Okay, it takes 10 hundredths to make 1/10. All right, if you notice, everything gets 10 times smaller every place value to the left, right, to the right, whatever. So they're called hundredths because it takes 100 hundredths to make one whole. If we're talking about money, these are like pennies, right? It takes 100 pennies to make one whole dollar, right? So we got one whole. Tenths takes 10 tenths to make a whole. We have hundredths. It takes 100 hundredths to make one whole. Then if we took this little hundredths and cut it into 10 little pieces, one of those tiny little pieces would be what's called a thousandths. It takes 10 thousandths to make 1/100th. Okay, and you can probably guess how many of these it takes to make one whole. And the answer to that is it takes 1,000 to make one whole. So what you're noticing is as the numbers get, let's make a decimal right here. As the numbers get increasingly longer behind the decimal, they also get increasingly smaller. So this number right here is even a 10,000th. So it's even smaller. It is 10 of those. That is a 10,000th. So super, uber, little small. All right, so when we're talking about decimals this chapter, we're talking about very small little numbers. Smaller than one whole, smaller than $1. Very, very small numbers when you see a decimal. Okay, so here are the tips for today. When you need to compare or order numbers, the best thing to do is to line up the decimal. That way, you'll be able to have all of your whole numbers together. All of your tenths will be lined up, all of your hundredths and thousandths, and so on and so forth. So by lining up your decimals, you are able to keep everything in the same value. Okay, so for example, 2.39, we're going to put it 2.39. This is two whole numbers, 3/10, 9/100. The next one is 0.231, 2.315, and 0.23. So those are all now lined up according to the decimal. The next thing it says to do is to add zeros if you want. So basically what that just means is if there's like an empty space, you can put a 0 there, right? Because 0 thousandths is the same as no thousandths. Okay, now we can now compare these from left to right, but what I want to do first is kind of show you what these decimals actually look like. Okay, that 23 hundredths is just 2/10 and 3/100. The 0.231 is 2/10, 3/100, and one tiny decimal, one tiny thousandths. You can see here with this 2 and 315 thousandths, the 2 means we have two whole numbers there. That's like $2, right? Two whole numbers. 3/10, 1, 2, 3, 1,000ths, and 1/100th and 5 thousandths. So you might be like, well, 5 is bigger than 1, but this is 1/10, and this is only 5 thousandths. So it's much, much smaller. And then right here we have 2 again. So there's our 2 wholes. And then our 3/10, and this time we have 9/100. Okay, so now that we've seen them visually, now we can go back and do it on paper. This says to compare from left to right. So we are not even going to be paying any attention to any number except these numbers right here. And the reason for that is because we want to compare these whole numbers first, the biggest whole numbers first. That just looking at those whole numbers will tell us which ones are biggest. And it's these 2 that have 2 wholes. So we know that those 2 are the biggest. Okay, but they both have 2 wholes. So then let's look at the next place value, which is the tenths. They also both have 3/10. There's our 3/10. So they're equal in the tenths as well. So that means let's compare the hundredths. If we look at the hundredths, that's 9/100, and that's only 1/100. And we can see the difference if we look at that place value again. There's that 1/100, not very many, and there's 9/100. You can tell that this one is a lot more than this one, which means that this is the biggest one, 2 39/100. And you might be like, hold on, Mrs. Madsen. Look, there is a 5 right here, and that's bigger than the 0 that has. That's true. It does have more thousandths, but look how tiny those thousandths are. Okay, those thousandths do not compare to all of those hundredths. So they don't even matter. They don't even make up one of these right here. So we don't even care about anything that comes after. We only care that there was differences. Oh, I just deleted all of that. That's not good. We only care that there were differences right here in that place value. The 9 is bigger than the 1. So what that tells us then is the largest number is 2 39/100. The next largest was the other one that had 2 wholes. And now let's go on and let's compare the other numbers that had the hundredths or that didn't have any whole numbers. And what we have is we have a 2 and a 2. So they match up there. They both have 2/100. They both have 3 thousandths. Sorry, those are hundredths. They both have 3/100, and we can see that picture right there. There's our 3/100 there and our 3/100 there. But then if we look, this has 1/1000th. This has no thousandth. And you can see that right little guy right there. So if we are comparing these two, there is only one slight difference, and that is that that has a thousandth, and this has no thousandth. So now putting them in order, the next one will be the 231 thousandth, and then if I move my face, this the smallest is just the 23 hundredths. Okay, so that is an example of how you can compare, how you can order numbers from greatest to least. Okay, so thinking about money can also help you compare and order decimals. If you turn decimals into money, it might be a little more obvious to you which one is the biggest. For example, if you have a 4.5, one way you can think of that is $4, 5 dimes, and 0 pennies. You would also say $4.50. So if you like that, then you'll know that instead of saying ones, you'll see these as dollars. Instead of saying tenths, you'll say that these are dimes. And instead of saying pennies or hundredths, you'll call these pennies. And that's kind of how the place value works. But it's the same. It takes 10 pennies to equal a dime, 10 dimes to equal a dollar. So the place value is the same if you want to think money. Here we have 99 cents, which is 9/10 and 9/100, $3 and 1 penny, and this would be $4 and 9 pennies, or $4.09. So if that helps you to think money, then think money when you're comparing and ordering numbers. Okay, if we look at these two numbers right here, I've had students in the past say, well, this number is bigger, so it's the greatest one. And they think that the bigger the number is, the longer it is, the bigger it is. But they're forgetting that these numbers to the right of the decimal get 10 times smaller every time there's a number to the right. So what this actually looks like is 7/10 and 9/1000. Looking at it this way, it's pretty obvious that the 7/10 is way bigger than 9 tiny thousandths. These 9/1000 don't even equal 1/100th. So don't be fooled by how long a number is. Line them up. If we were to line these up, we would see that, oh, look right there. This has no hundredths and or no tenths, and this has 7/10. So this one, the 7/10, is way bigger than 0/10. If we were to line these up, put my decimal, so I write down my first number, and then I make sure my decimal is right below it, and the 2's in front of the decimal, the 31's behind the decimal, and this is an example where I could maybe add the 0. If I just compare these two numbers, both of these have a 2. Oops. Both of these have a 2, whole numbers, but then in the hundredths place, this has 3/100. So I don't even care what's behind. I already know that this one is bigger. Cool, huh? Let's do one more. And if you want to pause and solve it yourself and then push play so you can see, once it is lined up, even though this one is longer, we really just care about this first place value where there is a difference. And we can see that 1/100th is bigger than 9/10, not by much, but it is still bigger. So this one is greater, 1 1/100. Last one. I'm not even going to write it down because I can see this has 0 whole numbers and this has 2 whole numbers. So this one is bigger. Okay, so sometimes you don't even line them up because there's an obvious bigger number to begin with. So how do we compare decimals? The very most important thing is to line those decimals up, then look from left to right, and you can see where there's differences in place values. Hope that helped. See you next time.